My name is Kevin Brooks, and for 32 years, I built something that wasn't supposed to break. Not like this, not from the inside. There's a particular kind of silence that lives inside a house after a funeral. It doesn't leave when the guests go. It doesn't fade with time the way people promise it will. It settles into the walls, seeps into the furniture, lingers in the air like something unfinished. It had been exactly 1 year since my wife died. 365 days since I stood beside a grave and watched the only person who ever understood me disappear beneath the earth. People say time heals. What they mean is time numbs. It doesn't heal anything. I learned to live with the quiet, not accept it, never that, just carry it, like everything else. The company was the only thing left that still obeyed logic. It responded to effort, to pressure, to control. Unlike people, unlike family, I didn't inherit it. I didn't walk into something ready-made. I built it, from the ground up, from risk and exhaustion and decisions that could have destroyed me if I had been even slightly weaker. There were years I didn't sleep more than 4 hours a night. Years I missed holidays, birthdays, anniversaries. She understood. That's why it worked. That's why I believed it would last. Dylan grew up inside that world. Not fully in it. Not like I was, but close enough to see what it took. I remember him as a boy, standing in the doorway of my office, leaning against the frame, watching me work without saying a word. He didn't ask for attention. He just watched, like he was studying me, like he was trying to understand what it meant to be a man who builds something from nothing. I thought that meant something. I thought it stayed with him. When he got older, I brought him in. Not out of obligation, out of trust. I gave him responsibility slowly, carefully. Not because I didn't believe in him, but because I knew what pressure does to people who aren't ready. He learned fast, faster than I expected. He was sharp, confident, sometimes too confident. But I told myself that was youth, that edge, that hunger, and maybe that's where it started. The difference between building something and believing you could take it. The message came at 9:14 in the morning. I remember the time because everything after that felt disconnected from it. Like time split into before and after, and I never quite returned to the same place. There was no call, no warning, no meeting scheduled, just a notification. Cold, efficient, final. We've decided to move forward with new leadership. Your access has been revoked. Please coordinate with legal for transition details. No explanation, no signature, no respect. I read it once, then again, then a third time slower. Not because I didn't understand the words, because I was trying to understand the reality behind them. First, I assumed error. Systems fail. People miscommunicate. Mistakes happen. That's what I told myself. Because the alternative didn't make sense. I opened my laptop, entered my credentials. Denied. Again. Denied. I tried my email. Locked out. Internal systems. Gone. Like I had never existed inside them. That's when something shifted. Not panic. Not yet. Something colder. I called the office. No answer. I called my assistant. Straight to voicemail. I called Dylan. It rang once. Then silence. He declined it. That was the moment. That precise moment. Where the truth stopped asking for permission and stepped forward on its own. This wasn't a mistake. This wasn't confusion. This was deliberate. I sat there for a long time, staring at the screen, my reflection faint in the black surface of the locked system. I didn't recognize the man looking back. Not because he had changed, because he had been removed. I drove to the office anyway. Instinct. Habit. Maybe pride. Maybe the last piece of me that still believed presence meant something. The building looked the same. Clean. Controlled. Untouched. The kind of place that suggests permanence. The kind of lie I used to believe. My name was still in the directory. Kevin Brooks, founder. Funny how long things like that stay in place after the truth changes. I stepped toward the entrance. And that's where it ended. Security stopped me. A young guy. New. I could tell immediately. He didn't know me. Didn't recognize me. Didn't hesitate. Sir, I'm going to have to ask you to leave. Sir. Not Kevin. Not Mr. Brooks. Not founder. Just sir. I looked at him for a second longer than necessary. Not angry. Just measuring the moment. Me. Standing outside something I built. Stopped by someone who had no idea what he was blocking. I built this place, I said. My voice was calm, controlled. That part of me still worked. He shifted slightly, uncomfortable, but firm. I understand, sir. I have instructions. Instructions. That word stayed with me, because instructions mean structure, planning, hierarchy, decision. Someone gave that order. Someone signed off on it. Someone made sure this would happen cleanly, quietly, without resistance. I didn't argue. There's a point where fighting makes you smaller, where anger turns you into exactly what they expect. I wasn't going to give them that, so I stepped back, turned, walked away. The doors closed behind me, and just like that, 32 years ended without a single raised voice. Dylan didn't call. Not that day. Not that night. Not the next morning. No explanation. No justification. No attempt to soften it. And that's what cut through everything else. Not the betrayal. The silence. Because betrayal still acknowledges you. Silence erases you. I went home. The house felt the same. Too big. Too quiet. Still carrying traces of someone who wasn't there anymore. Her things were still where she left them. I hadn't moved them. Couldn't. Maybe didn't want to. I sat in the dark. Didn't turn on the lights. Didn't pour a drink. Didn't distract myself. I just sat there, letting it settle. Letting the reality sink in without resistance. 32 years. Gone. Not taken. Not lost. Removed. By my own son. And the more I thought about it, the clearer it became. This wasn't sudden. This wasn't emotional. This wasn't impulsive. This was structured, prepared, executed. They didn't just push me out. They replaced me. And people don't replace something that works, unless they've already secured what comes next. That's when the thought came. Quiet, sharp, unavoidable. This wasn't just betrayal. This was a transition. And transitions like that don't happen without a reason. I leaned back in the chair, closed my eyes, and for the first time in a year, grief stepped aside, and something else took its place. Cold, focused, patient, suspicion. It happened exactly 1 year after the funeral. Not a day earlier. Not a day late. Like someone had been waiting for the date to matter. I remember the morning clearly. Too clearly. The kind of clarity that only comes when something is about to shift again. I hadn't slept much the night before. Sleep had become optional lately. Not because I couldn't rest. Because my mind refused to shut down. It kept replaying the same question over and over again. Why? Not how they did it. I already understood that. Not what they did. That part was obvious. But you don't remove a founder overnight without cause. You don't erase a man who built everything unless he becomes a problem. Or an obstacle. And I needed to know which one I had become. I left the house early. Didn't bother with breakfast. Didn't check my phone. There was nothing left on it that mattered. The city looked the same. People moving. Cars passing. Life continuing like nothing had changed. That's the part no one tells you. The world doesn't pause when yours collapses. I stopped at a small cafe. One I used to visit years ago, before the company consumed everything. Before success replaced routine. I ordered coffee. Black. Sat near the window. Watched strangers live their lives. And for a moment, I felt removed from all of it. Like I had stepped outside my own life and was watching someone else's story fall apart. That's when he approached me. No hesitation. No introduction. Just presence. He sat down across from me without asking. Not aggressive. Not nervous. Just certain. I looked at him. Mid-40s, maybe. Neutral face. Clean clothes. Nothing remarkable. The kind of man you forget seconds after seeing him. Kevin Brooks, he said. Not a question. I didn't answer. Didn't need to. He reached into his coat. slowly, deliberately, and placed something on the table. A key. Small. Metal. Old. No explanation. No envelope. No note. Just the key. I stared at it. Then at him. "What is this?" I asked. He didn't answer. Just held my gaze for a second longer than necessary. Then stood up. And walked away. No goodbye. No instructions. No trace of hesitation. I didn't follow him. Didn't call out. Didn't stop him. Because something inside me already knew. This wasn't random. I picked up the key. Cold. Worn. Used. Not decorative. Not symbolic. Functional. There was a number engraved on it. Faded. But still visible. Unit 317. That was it. No address. No company name. No context. Just a number. And a key. I sat there for a long time. Long enough for the coffee to go cold. Long enough for the moment to settle into something real. Because this changed things. This meant someone was watching. Someone knew. Someone had decided I needed to see something. The question was, why now? Exactly 1 year after her death. I turned the key in my hand. And that's when it connected. Not fully. Not clearly. But enough. This wasn't about the company. Not directly. This was about her. I left the cafe without finishing the coffee. Drove without thinking. Let instinct take over. It didn't take long to find it. Storage facilities aren't hard to locate. Especially when you know what you're looking for. Old building. Metal doors. Security cameras placed just well enough to matter. Unit 317 was in the back. Of course it was. I stood in front of it for a moment. Key in hand. Heart steady. Mind not. Because I already knew. Whatever was inside was going to answer something. Or destroy whatever I thought I still understood. I unlocked it. The door opened with resistance. Like it hadn't been touched in a long time. Dust. Still air. Silence. No lights inside. Just shadows. I stepped in. Slowly. Letting my eyes adjust. Boxes. Several. Stacked. Organized. Not abandoned. Not forgotten. Placed. Intentionally. There was a table. Old. Metal. And on it, 3 things. A phone. A folder. And an envelope. I didn't touch anything at first. Just stood there. Looking. Because I recognized the phone. It was hers. The same one she used before she died. The one I was told had been lost. My chest tightened. Not from grief. From realization. It hadn't been lost. It had been removed. I stepped closer. Picked it up. Dead. No battery. But intact. Next to it. The folder. Thick. Heavy. Filled. I opened it. Documents. Transactions. Printouts. Accounts. Numbers I recognized. And some I didn't. But the names. The names made everything stop. Dylan. And Laura. My daughter-in-law. Together. Repeated. Across pages. Across accounts. Across timelines. Not random. Not occasional. Consistent. Deliberate. My hand tightened on the folder. And that's when I noticed the envelope. Plain. Unmarked. Except for one line. Written in handwriting I knew better than my own. My wife's. Start with her. No name. But I didn't need one. I already knew who she meant. Laura. I stood there in the silence of that storage unit, holding evidence I didn't yet fully understand, but felt with absolute certainty. This wasn't just betrayal. This was a plan. And I had just found the beginning of it. I closed the folder slowly, looked around the room one last time. And for the first time since all of this began, I wasn't confused anymore. I had direction. Someone had left me a trail. And now, I was going to follow it, no matter where it led. Even if it led straight through my own blood. I didn't bring the boxes home all at once. That would have been reckless. If someone had hidden those things for a year, then someone else had probably spent that same year hoping they would never be found. Men get careless when they think the past is buried. But they get dangerous when they realize it has been dug up. So I took only what I could carry without drawing attention. The phone. The folder. 2 smaller binders filled with bank records and copies of internal authorizations. I locked the unit again behind me and drove home without turning on the radio. The silence helped me think. Or maybe it made the thinking worse. By the time I pulled into the driveway, I already understood one thing with brutal certainty. My wife had known something before she died. Not everything, perhaps. Not the full shape of it. But enough to leave a trail. Enough to point me toward Laura. That wasn't suspicion anymore. That was instruction. I carried the evidence into my study like contraband and closed the door behind me. The house felt heavier than usual, as if memory itself had leaned closer to watch what I would do next. Her photograph was still on the shelf to my right. I didn't look at it. Couldn't. Not yet. I spread the papers across the desk and started where I always start when something smells wrong. Patterns. Not emotions. Not assumptions. Patterns. Money tells the truth long before people do. At first, the documents looked like noise. Transfers between subsidiary accounts. Vendor payments. Consultant retainers. Deferred bonuses. Restructuring reserves. The kind of language corporate thieves love because it turns theft into formatting. It makes betrayal look administrative. But the more I read, the cleaner the pattern became. Small transfers at first. Amounts too modest to trigger scrutiny. Then larger ones, spaced carefully between legitimate transactions. The same outside entities appearing again and again under different labels. Different states. Different holding names. Different mailing addresses. But the same routing structures. The same timing. The same hands. Laura's signature appeared more often than Dylan's. Not always directly. Sometimes it was digital approval. Sometimes it was internal authorization through finance. Sometimes it was a recommendation memo that Dylan had signed after the fact, trusting the summary instead of the substance. That made me stop. I leaned back in my chair and read one page 3 times. Then I read it again, because that was the first moment the shape of the betrayal changed. Up until then, I thought my son had turned on me for power. I thought he had chosen ambition over blood, and maybe greed over loyalty. Simple sins. Old sins. The kind men commit every day. But this was different. This was layered. Laura wasn't just helping him push me out. She was building a second track underneath him. A hidden structure. One that moved money outward while Dylan believed he was moving upward. That kind of scheme takes patience. Takes nerve. And it takes someone in the room who is trusted too easily. I kept digging. 3 shell companies appeared most often. None of them meant anything on their face. Bland names. Generic filings. The kind of paper entities people create when they don't want to be remembered. But one detail stayed consistent across all 3. The registered contacts tied back, indirectly but clearly enough, to Laura's side of the family. An address used once by her brother's construction business. A legal contact who had represented her father in a tax dispute years earlier. A management fee account linked to a holding company incorporated 6 months after Dylan married her. It was all there. Not obvious, but there. Like fingerprints wiped badly from glass. I opened an old external drive I kept in the safe and started cross-checking company records against archived board materials. I still had older copies. Older numbers. Older approvals from before they thought to lock me out. And the deeper I went, the uglier it became. The push to modernize leadership. The recommendations to streamline founder dependency. The sudden insistence that I step back from financial oversight because it would improve transition efficiency. It had all been part of the same script. Retire the old man. Isolate him. Control the reporting flow. Move the assets. Sell what remains. I could almost hear Laura's voice in the language. Smooth, polished, patient. She always spoke like someone arranging flowers over a coffin. Nothing sharp, nothing loud, everything respectable. That was her gift. She made poison sound practical. And Dylan, God help me, had mistaken that for intelligence. I found draft communications to outside buyers. Not signed but prepared. Preliminary acquisition language. Asset valuation summaries. Contingency clauses tied to executive transition. They had been preparing a sale while I was still in the building. while I was being told to slow down, while I was being nudged toward ceremonial retirement. They weren't just removing me. They were liquidating the future I built and planning to disappear into the smoke. I stood up and walked to the window because I suddenly needed distance from the desk. My hands weren't shaking yet, but the tremor was coming. I know my body. I know the signs. Rage begins in me as stillness. The colder I get, the worse it is. Outside, the yard was motionless. Late afternoon light. Bare branches moving only slightly in the wind. It looked like peace. Inside, I was staring at proof that my son had either joined a theft or been led blindfolded into one. Neither answer gave me comfort. I went back to the desk and turned to the phone. My wife's phone. I had delayed it because I knew what it meant. Paper is one thing. Numbers are one thing. But a dead woman's phone is intimate. It breathes. It accuses. It remembers. I found an old charging cable in a drawer and connected it. Nothing at first. Then a flicker. Then the screen lit like something returning from underwater. My throat tightened. I waited through the startup sequence and entered the passcode she had used for years. My birthday. Of course it was. Some wounds are quiet. The phone opened. I started with messages. Then notes. Then photos of documents taken at odd angles, some blurry, some clear enough to read. She had been collecting things. Quietly, carefully, without telling me. There were screenshots of transaction alerts. Photos of printed ledgers. A voice memo with no label. I pressed play. Her voice filled the room. Soft, tired, controlled. If you're hearing this, then I was right not to trust her. Start with Laura. Don't confront Dylan until you know whether he's involved or simply weak. There's a difference, Kevin. Don't ignore it. I closed my eyes. For 1 second, maybe 2. Not out of grief. Out of impact. Because there it was. The dividing line I hadn't been able to name. Involved. Or weak. A thief. Or a fool. I listened to the rest of the recording. She described small things she had noticed near the end. Laura taking calls in another room. Dylan repeating financial language he didn't fully understand. Sudden pressure to move certain reserves. Unusual hostility whenever she asked direct questions. She said she tried to warn me twice, but my mind had been on expansion and legal disputes and I dismissed it as family tension. That landed harder than anything else. Because she was right. I had dismissed it. I was so busy protecting the structure that I didn't hear the crack in the walls. By midnight I had enough to see the whole design. Laura had been siphoning money through shell entities tied to her family. Dylan had approved movements without understanding that the trail led back to people who would sacrifice him the moment anything collapsed. At the same time, they were preparing a sale to competitors under the cover of leadership transition. Once the deal closed, I would be the aging founder pushed aside. Dylan would be the useful idiot left holding signatures, and Laura's family would be sitting on millions no one could claw back quickly enough. It was elegant. I hated that. I hate any crime that succeeds first as craftsmanship. But elegance has one weakness. Timing. Schemes like that survive only if no one interrupts the sequence. Freeze one account, delay one filing, challenge one authorization at the right hour, and the whole machine starts tearing itself apart. I looked at the documents one final time, then opened my private contacts list. Not the company list. Mine. The one built over decades. The names I never handed over to Dylan because I knew loyalty in business should be earned in years, not inherited by blood. An old litigation partner. A forensic accountant who owed me 3 favors and a debt of respect. A retired judge who still knew which emergency motions got seen first and which disappeared in procedural fog. I didn't call them that night. Not yet. Because strategy requires something anger rarely grants. Discipline. I sat alone until the house went completely silent around me. Then I took out a legal pad and wrote one sentence across the top of the page. Do not save him too early. I stared at it for a long time. Because fathers make that mistake. We rush in. We protect. We confuse mercy with timing. But if Dylan was going to understand what had been done, and what he had allowed, then he needed to feel the ground shift under his own feet first. He needed one clear moment where Laura's hand was visible and mine was absent. Only then would he know the difference between being loved and being used. I capped my pen and looked at the evidence spread before me like the remains of a body finally identified. The company hadn't been stolen in a single move. It had been hollowed out from within, transaction by transaction, smile by smile, signature by signature. And now I knew exactly where to strike. I didn't sleep that night, not because I couldn't, because sleep would have softened the edge. And I needed it sharp. By morning, the plan was already formed. Not emotional, not reactive, precise. People think revenge is loud, explosive, immediate. They're wrong. Real damage is quiet, measured, timed so perfectly that by the time it's noticed, it's already irreversible. I made 3 calls before 8 a.m. Not to Dylan, not to Laura. They had nothing left to say that I needed to hear. The first call was to a man who understood numbers better than most people understand truth. Forensic accounting, cold mind, no loyalty except to facts. I need everything traced, I told him. Quietly. He didn't ask why. Men like him never do. They already know. The second call went to legal. Not corporate. Personal. Old connections. The kind you don't list on paper. I want emergency leverage, I said. Financial freeze authority. Preemptive filings. Quiet. A pause. Then, who are we freezing? I looked at the documents spread across my desk. At Dylan's name. At Laura's. At the network they thought no one could see. Everyone, I said. The third call mattered most. Because it wasn't about stopping them. It was about timing. I need to know when they move, I said. Not after. Not during. Before. Because plans like there's only work if no one interrupts the final step. The sale. The exit. The moment everything becomes irreversible. And I was going to be there before that moment. By noon I had confirmation. They were close. Closer than I expected. Preliminary agreements signed. Buyers aligned. Internal restructuring almost complete. And me? I was already erased from the system. Which meant no resistance. No interference. That's what they believed. That's why they were about to lose everything. I spent the rest of the day preparing. Not rushing. Not hesitating. Just aligning pieces. Because once I moved, there would be no going back. Even for him. That thought stayed with me longer than I expected. Dylan, my son. I replayed his silence again. Not his actions. Not the removal. The silence. Because that's where the truth lives. Not in what people do, but in what they don't bother to explain. If he had called, if he had tried, if there had been even a moment of hesitation. But there wasn't. And that told me everything I needed to know. By evening, everything was ready. The accounts identified. The shell companies mapped. The transfers documented. The legal triggers prepared. All that remained was the moment. Came faster than expected. 7:42 p.m. A message from one of my contacts. Short. Simple. They're initiating final transfer sequence tomorrow morning. I stared at the screen. Tomorrow. That was the moment they planned to disappear. To finalize the sale. To move the last of the money. To leave nothing behind but paperwork and confusion. They thought they were ahead. They thought I was finished. They thought wrong. I didn't wait. Timing is everything. But hesitation is death. I made the call. Execute, I said. No emotion. No explanation. Just one word. And everything began to collapse. Accounts frozen. Simultaneously. Across multiple institutions. Transactions halted mid-process. Flags triggered. Compliance departments alerted. Legal holds initiated. Every pathway they had built. Sealed. Not gradually. Instantly. Like oxygen cut from a room. I didn't watch it happen live. I didn't need to. I knew exactly what it looked like. Phones ringing. Emails flooding in. Confusion turning to panic. Because nothing terrifies people more than control slipping through their hands without warning. At 8:16 p.m. my phone rang. Dylan. I looked at the screen for a long time. First call in days. Not to explain. Not to apologize. To react. I let it ring. Then it stopped. A minute later, again. I answered this time. Silence on the other end for a second. Then, "What did you do?" No greeting. No hesitation. Straight to accusation. I almost smiled. "Careful," I said quietly. "You're speaking to someone who has no role in the company anymore." His breathing was sharp, uncontrolled. "Everything's frozen," he said. "Accounts, transactions, we can't move anything. Deals are collapsing. What did you do?" I leaned back in my chair, looked at the ceiling. "I corrected something," I said. "You're destroying everything," he snapped. "No, that's where he was wrong. I'm exposing it," I replied. Silence. Then, quieter. "What are you talking about?" That's when I knew. He didn't know everything. Not fully. Not yet. And that made it worse. "Ask your wife," I said. Another pause. Longer this time. "What does Laura have to do with this?" he asked. There it was. The crack. "She has everything to do with it," I said. "But you signed it. You approved it. You built the path she used." "That's not," he stopped, because even he could hear it. The doubt. The realization starting to form. "You trusted her," I continued, "without understanding what she was doing, where the money was going, who it was going to." "That's not true," he said, but weaker now. "Then prove it," I replied. Silence. Heavy. Then, "What happens now?" he asked. And for the first time, he didn't sound like the man who pushed me out. He sounded like the boy who used to stand in my doorway, watching, trying to understand. I closed my eyes for a second, then answered. "Now," I said slowly, "the truth comes out." And this time, I didn't hang up. He did. That night, everything they built started falling apart. Deals collapsed. Buyers pulled back. Lawyers stepped in. And somewhere inside that chaos, Laura realized something. She wasn't in control anymore. None of them were. And for the first time since all of this began, I wasn't reacting. I was deciding. The company wasn't gone. It was being revealed. And the people who thought they owned it were about to learn what it actually cost.